There's a bottle sitting on a shelf in your local drugstore, somewhere between the deodorant and the shaving cream. That smells almost identical to a $300 designer fragrance that men have been complimenting women on for the last 15 years. The people who work in the perfume industry, the actual chemists, the fragrance buyers, the sales associates who've been doing this for decades, they've known about it the whole time. They just had no reason to tell you. Because every time you walk into a department store and drop $300 on a shiny bottle with a French name on it, somebody in a corporate office in Paris or New York gets a very nice bonus. And every time you reapply that expensive fragrance 4 hours later because it disappeared off your skin, that bonus gets a little bigger. So today we're going to talk about a $25 bottle that the insiders have been quietly buying for themselves, what's actually inside it, why it punches so far above its price tag, and what the luxury houses really don't want the average shopper to figure out. Because once you understand how fragrance pricing actually works, you're never going to look at that glass counter the same way again. Let's start with the part that sounds impossible. How can a $25 bottle smell anything like a $300 one? The answer is something the industry has known since the 1970s, and it has to do with where fragrance oils actually come from. Most of the world's perfume oils, even the ones that end up in the most prestigious bottles in Paris, are produced by a tiny handful of flavor and fragrance houses. Names like Givaudan, Firmenich, International Flavors and Fragrances, Symrise, Maine. These 5 companies supply the raw materials and the finished compositions for an enormous percentage of every fragrance sold on Earth. When a luxury house launches a new scent, they don't grow the jasmine themselves. They don't distill the oud in a back room in the Champs-Élysées. They hire a perfumer, often one who works directly for Givaudan or Firmenich. That perfumer builds the formula using the same palette of molecules and accords available to everyone else in the industry. So when a smaller brand, or a drugstore brand, or one of those Middle Eastern perfume houses with a confusing name, a beautiful bottle, decides to make something that smells like a famous designer hit, they're not stealing anything. They're walking into the same suppliers, ordering similar accords, and asking a perfumer to build something in the same direction. The fragrance world has a name for this. They call them dupes, or inspired by scents, and on Reddit communities like r/fragrance clones and r/designer fragrances. Threads about them get thousands of upvotes because once you smell a good one side by side with the original, the illusion of luxury cracks wide open. Here's the part that hurts. The actual cost of the juice inside a bottle of designer fragrance is, on average, somewhere between 2% and 10% of what you pay. Industry analyses published in places like Business of Fashion and even old Fortune magazine breakdowns have shown this for years. The rest is the bottle, the box, the cellophane, the celebrity contract, the magazine spread, the department store markup, the distributor margin, and the brand mythology. When you pay $300 for a luxury parfum, you might be paying $6 to $15 for the liquid. The other $285 is the story. And stories are powerful, nobody is denying that. There's a real pleasure in unwrapping a heavy glass bottle with a satisfying cap. But if what you actually want is to smell incredible for 10 hours straight, the story is not what's doing the work. The molecules are, and the molecules can be bought for $25 if you know where to look. Now here's where I have to be honest with you, because this channel doesn't do clickbait without backing it up. When people online claim a $25 bottle is 100% identical to a $300 designer, that's usually an exaggeration. The opening minutes, what perfumers call the top notes, are often where you can tell the difference. The cheaper version might smell a little sharper, a little more synthetic in the first 10 minutes. But here's the thing, fragrance fans on Fragrantica and base notes keep pointing out, over and over, in thread after thread. After about 20 to 30 minutes, when the top notes burn off and the heart and base notes settle onto your skin, the gap between the cheap version and the expensive one shrinks dramatically. In blind tests posted on Reddit, regular people consistently fail to identify which wrist is wearing the designer and which is wearing the $25 bottle. And the compliments come exactly the same way. Because the people smelling you on the subway, at dinner, in the elevator, they're not analyzing a top note structure. They're getting a wave of something warm and clean and attractive, and their brain says, that person smells expensive. The brain doesn't know the price. The brain only knows the molecules. And if you want to know which specific $25 bottles the insiders are actually buying for themselves, the ones that have quietly built cult followings in the fragrance community while the big houses pretend they don't exist. Stick with me, because the one I'm going to name in a few minutes is the one that even some department store sales associates admit. off the record that they wear on their days off. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me, what's the most expensive perfume you've ever bought, and did it actually live up to the price? I read every single one of these. You'd be amazed how many people write in saying their $200 bottle gave them 2 hours of wear before vanishing. Let's keep going. So which bottle are we actually talking about? There isn't just one. The $25 tier has become its own category in the last decade. The players in it have names you may have walked past 100 times without registering. Brands like Lattafa, Armaf, Haramain, Maison Alhambra, these are Middle Eastern houses. Most of them based in the United Arab Emirates that have been making oil-based and alcohol-based fragrances for generations. In the Gulf, perfume is treated the way wine is treated in France. It's a serious craft with deep roots. And when these houses started exporting to the United States through Amazon, small importers about 10 years ago, the fragrance community on YouTube and Reddit lost its mind. Because suddenly there were bottles at $25, $30, $40 that were performing, in terms of longevity and projection, better than designers selling for 10 times the price. Lattafa Kamra, Armaf Club de Nuit Intense Man, Lattafa Assad, Maison Alhambra Layali, these names show up constantly in fragrance discussions about value. Club de Nuit Intense Man in particular has been called by reviewers like Jeremy Fragrance and countless Redditors one of the best performing fragrances ever made for under $50, and it's frequently compared to Creed Aventus, which retails around $450 for 100 milliliters. Now let's separate the hype from the reality, because this is the part most videos skip. Is the $25 bottle literally identical to the $300 one? No. It's inspired by, it's in the same family, it hits the same emotional register. Trained noses can tell them apart in the first 10 minutes. But here's what's verifiable and what the data actually shows. The concentration of fragrance oil in many of these inexpensive Middle Eastern bottles is often higher than what's in the designer versions. Sometimes labeled as extrait or parfum strength, sometimes just because the formula leans heavier. Higher concentration means longer wear and bigger projection. That's not marketing, that's chemistry. An eau de toilette typically contains around 5% to 15% fragrance oil. An eau de parfum, 15% to 20%. A parfum or extrait, 20% to 30% or more. When a $25 bottle is sitting at parfum strength and a $300 designer is sitting at eau de parfum strength, the cheaper one will literally last longer on your skin. That's been confirmed in user reports across Fragrantica, where longevity votes for some of these budget bottles regularly outscore the luxury fragrances they're compared to. There's another piece of this that nobody at the department store will ever bring up, and that's reformulation. The International Fragrance Association, the IFRA, sets safety guidelines for what can and can't go into perfume. And over the last 20 years, they've restricted or limited a long list of classic ingredients. Oak moss, the backbone of old-school Chypre fragrances, has been heavily restricted since the early 2000s. Certain musks, certain citrus oils, certain animalic notes, all reduced or replaced. Which means that the bottle of a famous classic your mother wore in 1985 does not smell the same as the bottle with the same name sitting on the shelf today. The luxury houses quietly reformulated. They didn't put it on the box. They didn't issue a press release. Longtime fragrance fans on Bossa Notes have documented this obsessively, comparing vintage bottles to current ones and noting the differences. And here's the irony. Some of the smaller, cheaper houses, because they're not bound by the same brand prestige expectations, sometimes use formulations that feel closer to the original vintage character of a classic than the current expensive bottle bearing the original name. So you can pay $300 for a watered-down modern reformulation, or $25 for something that feels closer to what the perfume used to be. Insiders know this. Casual shoppers don't. Let me also bust a couple of myths while we're here, because there's a lot of nonsense floating around about cheap fragrance. Myth number 1. Cheap perfume gives you headaches, and expensive perfume doesn't. Not true. Headaches from fragrance are usually caused by specific aroma chemicals that show up in both price tiers. Some people are sensitive to certain synthetic musks or to high doses of iso-E super, ambroxan, and those molecules appear in $2,000 niche bottles as readily as in $20 ones. Myth number 2. Expensive perfume uses natural ingredients, and cheap perfume uses chemicals. Also misleading. Almost every modern fragrance, regardless of price, is built primarily on synthetic aroma molecules, because naturals are unstable, expensive, and often restricted. Even the most prestigious houses use synthetics. The difference is in the quality of the composition and the specific molecules chosen, not in some imagined natural versus chemical divide. Myth number 3. If a perfume is cheap, it must be fake or counterfeit. Counterfeits exist, absolutely, especially on third-party Amazon sellers, and you should be careful. But a legitimate Lattafa or Armaf bottle is not a counterfeit. It's an original product from a legitimate company, just one that doesn't carry a French luxury name. So which one is the bottle? The one that fragrance community insiders, the ones who've smelled hundreds of bottles, keep coming back to as the best $25 buy on the market right now. The answer that comes up more than any other in serious fragrance discussions is Armaf Club de Nuit Intense Man, around $25 to $35 depending on where you buy it. Released in 2015 by Armaf, a brand based in the UAE. The fragrance is widely understood to be inspired by Creed Aventus, which retails for around $450. The pyramid features pineapple, blackcurrant, apple, bergamot in the opening, rose and jasmine in the heart, and a base of musk, vanilla, sandalwood, and birch. On Fragrantica, it has tens of thousands of votes, with longevity scores that frequently match or exceed Aventus itself. On Reddit, blind comparison threads routinely have users unable to tell the two apart after 30 minutes on skin. And here's the kicker. Multiple reviewers, including some who openly own bottles of the real Creed, have admitted that for daily wear, for going to work, for not worrying about spraying a small fortune onto their shirt, the $25 bottle is what they actually reach for. That's not a hot take. That's the consensus that's been building quietly in the community for years. If you want maximum longevity from any fragrance, cheap or expensive, here are the things that actually work. Backed by both chemistry and the agreement of just about every serious perfumer who's spoken on the subject. Apply to moisturized skin, because dry skin doesn't hold fragrance molecules. An unscented lotion or even a thin layer of Vaseline on your pulse points before you spray will extend the life of any perfume by hours. Spray on clothing as well as skin, since fibers hold scent far longer than skin does. Though always test on a small area first, because some fragrances can stain. Don't rub your wrists together, but not for the reason everyone says. The myth is that rubbing breaks the molecules. That's not really what happens. What actually happens is friction and heat accelerate evaporation of the top notes, making the opening seem to disappear faster. So just let it dry, and finally, store your bottles away from light and heat. A bathroom shelf is the worst possible place. A dark drawer or a closet is ideal. A well-stored bottle can stay good for years. A bottle that lives on a sunny windowsill can turn within months. Here's what I want you to take away. The fragrance industry is one of the highest margin businesses on earth, and the gap between what you pay, what you get is wider than almost any other product category in your house. That doesn't mean luxury bottles are scams. Some of them are genuinely beautiful compositions worth experiencing if you can afford them. But the idea that you need to spend $300 to smell incredible, to get compliments, to feel confident walking into a room, that idea is marketing. It is not chemistry. And the insiders, the people who actually work with these molecules every day, the people who buy bottles by the case, they smell hundreds a year. Those people have known it the whole time. Now you know too. So next time you're standing at that glass counter watching a sales associate hand you a tester strip with a knowing smile, you'll understand exactly what you're buying and what you're not. If you want me to break down the next tier up, the $40 to $60 bottles that the fragrance community considers genuinely incredible regardless of price, including the one that even some niche house perfumers privately admit they're impressed by, tell me in the comments which fragrance you want me to investigate next, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Because the next bottle on this list, the one I'm saving for that video, is the one that made me question whether I'd ever pay full retail for designer perfume again.